Good morning. I would like to call to order the April 6, 2022 Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Staff, please call the roll so that we can establish a quorum.
Good morning, everybody. At this time, I am only asking those TAC members attending in person to respond by saying here when I call your name. And I want to remind you by hitting the button on the base, when it's red on top, it means that you're on and we can get you on the recording. And if there's any alternates, please also state your name if you're attending on behalf of a TAC representative. Jim Bell. And I'm going to get this last name wrong. I'm sorry. Naresh. I'm not sure, Quan, if you know. Okay, so Quanter, do you know how to say Naresh's last name? Marahu, okay. Gary Dunmeyer. Richard Pereira. Kenny Wilson.
Here.
Chang Jen Lan. Jamie Brown.
Here.
Natalie Crowley.
Mike Morrow for Natalie.
Kim Glass Castro. Gary Sypek.
Will Hicks for Gary Sypek.
Brian Davis.
Present.
Levi McCollum is absent. Aaron Hoffman.
Here.
Terrence Bailey. He's here. He doesn't have a microphone yet. Christopher Marsh. Joyce Kai.
Chris
Lorraine
Marsh is
Carg-
here.
Lorraine Cargo will be absent. Kim Delaney. Michael Odell. Alex Hansen.
Here.
Javier Falcone. John Crane.
Here.
Valerio Riccio for Javier Falcone.
Modus Alturk.
Here.
Kara Ferris.
Here,
We have a quorum in person, Madam Chair.
thank you. Next, modifications to the agenda. Staff, are there any modifications to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. I do have several members that are virtual. So I have, and I just want to confirm they're all on the line. I have Jim Bell, who has noted he has a medical restriction preventing his in-person attendance. Joyce Kai noted the school district is still experiencing staff shortages and her presence in the office is still required. Valerio Riccio requested to participate remotely, but did not provide further explanation. Christopher Marsh noted it conflicts with his regular work
I'm abroad.
schedule. And Kim Delaney is virtual until she arrives in person.
Okay. TAC members, are there any objections to allowing these members to participate remotely? Seeing or hearing none, these members are approved to participate remotely. Margie, please note their attendance in the minutes.
Yes, ma'am. And I do have one addition. Aramis Cabrera is present on behalf of Palm Springs.
Thank you. Next item is minutes for March 2nd, 2022. Are there any changes to the minutes? If not, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
Moved. Second.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Motion was by Mo and second by Mike Odell. Yes, okay.
I have a motion by Mo and a second by Mike. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Moving on, the general public comments and public comments on agenda items. Instructions on how to provide public comments are included in the agenda. Staff, have any general comments been received?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next are comments from the chair and members. I don't have any comments. This time I would like to invite any TAC member comments on items not already on the agenda. For members participating remotely, please utilize the raised hand feature in the Zoom platform, and then remember to unmute your microphone once you are recognized. I don't see any raised cards in-house. Margie, is there anyone with a raised hand?
No, Madam Chair. And I don't see any tent cards raised in person.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Tac Liaison Report. I'd like to invite Connor to provide an update.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Connor Campabasso. I'm your TAC liaison, and I have a couple items for you this morning. So first off, the TPA hosted a panel event on March 31st to discuss mobility and economic development trends. If you are interested in viewing that recording, you can visit palmbeachtpa.org/mobility panel. Next, the TPA would like to congratulate the city of Belle Glade for adopting Vision Zero resolution on March 23rd to establish the goal of zero traffic related fatalities or serious injuries. If you would like more information about the TPA's Vision Zero efforts, you can visit palmbeachtpa.org/safety. Next, the TPA would like to encourage local municipalities and schools to celebrate National Bike and Roll to School Day on May 4th. For more information and to register for the event, visit walkbiketoschool.org. A public workshop to present alternatives for the TPA's Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7 Mobility Corridor Study will be held on May 10th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the TPA office. For more information on that, you visit palmbeachtpa.org/Okie. The TPA is hosting a virtual Vision Zero workshop on May 13th, also from 2 to 4 p.m. To register, you can visit palmbeachtpa.org/VZ workshop. Next, the U.S. Department of Transportation announced a funding opportunity for 3 discretionary grants. First is Mega, Infra, and then Rural, with applications due on May 23rd. For more information on that, you can visit transportation.gov/grants. And last, the next TPA Governing Board meeting will be held on April 21st at 9 a.m., both in person and virtually. And those meeting details can be found on our website at palmbeachtpa.org/board. And that is all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connor. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair. And I did want to note for the record that CJ has joined us in person.
Thank you. Do any committee members have any comments or questions on the liaison report? I don't see any raised cards, so we'll move on. The next are action items, and today there are no action items on the agenda. So we'll move on to information items. And the first one is the Brightline update. I'd like to invite Ali Soul from Brightline to present this item.
Good morning. I practiced what I preach and I took the Brightline up here from Miami and walked to the TPA offices. So I apologize for a few minutes tardy, but right on time. Good morning. My name is Ali Soul. I'm the Vice President of Community Relations for Brightline, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to update the board today on our progress and everything else new that we have going on. So I have a quick presentation and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So as most of you know, Brightline is the only privately owned and operated intercity express train system in the United States. We obviously operate our south segment, Miami to West Palm Beach, under construction to Orlando, which we will complete at the end of this year. And we also have our Vegas expansion project, which would connect Southern California with Las Vegas, which is undergoing design and engineering at the moment. So our major milestones, we've had a heck of a couple of months, and this year is only going to get more exciting as we make significant progress on the expansion to Orlando and our 2 new inline stations in South Florida. So again, as many of you know, we operate between downtown Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. We resumed operations in November after being temporarily suspended for about 18 months. We rehired 200 new teammates and launched a new door-to-door mobility service called Brightline Plus when we relaunched operations in November, which I'll talk a little bit about later on in my presentation. While we were temporarily suspended, we did not slow down. We in fact kept on and tried to accelerate our Orlando construction. We also took the opportunity to make progress on our 2 new inline stations. We have Boca which is set to open in the fall, and our station in Aventura, which is also expected to open in the fall. And then we are continuing our discussions with FDOT and the Central Florida community about a potential future expansion to Tampa that would include a stop maybe in the Disney Springs area. And as you can see also on the map, we do have 2 stations that we would look to also add to our system. We do have a commitment to add a station in the Treasure Coast 5 years after starting operations to Orlando. And then we're also interested in continuing our discussion with the Brevard County with the region. Their TPO actually did a study to determine where a station would be best located in Brevard County. And so we will have discussions with both them and their Treasure Coast about those potential future stations and the timing as it relates to that. So we're focused on building smarter and more prosperous communities. I haven't presented to this board in a while. So who's been on Brightline? Almost everybody. Good to see. If you haven't, we invite you to come back. We invite you to visit us. Our stations are located in the downtowns of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. Our station in Miami is located on the original site where Henry Flagler brought the rail down when he expanded the Florida East Coast Railway. It's an 11-acre site that includes 1.5 million square feet of transit-oriented development, 2 residential towers, 2 Class A office buildings, and then a mezzanine level that includes a food court and ground floor retail. Our Fort Lauderdale station is located just north of Broward Boulevard. We are in the Flagler Village, Fat Village area, which has seen significant growth since the announcement of Brightline. And our station in West Palm Beach is obviously located between the square and Clematis Street. Our station in Aventura is located to the west of the mall. It is located on the west side of Biscayne Boulevard. We are working on a pedestrian overpass that would connect and provide direct connection into the mall, as well as a mobility plan around the station that would feed the city of Aventura. And then our station in Boca is essentially across the street from Meisner Park. We're located in close proximity to the City Hall, to the downtown library, and then also to the Cultural Center. And our station in Orlando is located at the Orlando International Airport. That station is it's part of the intermodal terminal facility, which if you've been to the MIC, the Miami Intermodal Center at the Miami Airport, it is similar to that. It has an automated people mover that connects it to the North Terminal, and it will actually be the hub of their new terminal that will double the capacity of the Orlando International Airport. There will eventually be about 120 new gates that are centered around that mobility complex. So that it's actually exists. Our office is located there. We are working on the build out of our station for the launch of operations to Orlando early next year. So Brightline Plus, I mentioned. Brightline Plus is our new door-to-door service that's powered by our app and supported by a fleet of almost all electric vehicles. So we launched this again in November, and essentially as a guest, you can book this service within 2 hours of your arrival or departure. And you can do it all through our app. And what we found while we were temporarily suspended and what we had heard and what we call Brightline 1.0 is that people love the Brightline service. There was just friction in how they got from their first destination to the station and then to their final destination. And as our president, Patrick Goddard, says, using our service has to be as easy as picking up the keys and getting in your car. Obviously, that's the the easy part of your journey. The difficult part is when you get stuck in traffic, there's an accident on I-95, it's raining, you know, you name it, we've all been there. And so what we're really trying to do, again, through our app, is you could go in and have a Brightline branded vehicle. It could be a private ride, which would be one of our Tesla cars, or you could reserve a shared ride, which is in a van, or an electric golf cart. The golf carts serve about 1 mile around our station. The vans and the Teslas are about a 5-mile radius. And so if you were at work, you could have that one of those vehicles pick you up, take you to Brightline. And if you wanted to go to, call it Miami Beach for dinner, we would have a Brightline branded vehicle that could take you and do your entire journey. And so as we expand our system and add new stations, this platform will evolve based on what those cities have for existing services. And then again, what makes sense in partnering with the locals on other options to add. For example, Aventura just launched their freebie service, which is a fleet of branded Teslas that is on demand. So how do we work with them with that existing service to feed into Brightline? So phase 2, I've been with the company for a while now. And when I first started, even now, people are like, oh, Brightline, it's that train that's going to go to Orlando. And the answer is, yes, we're almost there. We're nearly 75% complete with construction. I mean, this is a close to $3 billion infrastructure project that is pretty significant. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in our phase 2. But again, these are just some images of our construction, and everybody likes to see videos and progress. It's been a while since I've actually made it up to Orlando to see the progress. So every time our Orlando team makes this kind of this short info video, I'm just amazed by what's going on there. So I'm going to play that. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Again, this project goes through 8 counties, more than 50 cities. So it is a pretty monumental effort and project, especially as it relates to coordination with our local governments. Again, projects of this magnitude aren't possible without the support that we've received, obviously from the South Florida, the Florida community, and from many of you in this room who our technical teams have worked with on the grade crossing improvements that occur in each of your jurisdictions. So what are we doing in phase 2? I think it's always important to remind people we are double tracking the entire corridor. Again, phase 2 is what we call the expansion between West Palm Beach and Orlando. It's about 100 and something miles between West Palm and Cocoa, and then 40 miles of new rail between Cocoa and the airport. So again, not only are we doing this project within the existing FEC railway corridor, but but we're doing it while freight trains continue to operate and to service their customers. So again, we're double tracking between West Palm and Cocoa. Trains will reach top speeds of 110 miles per hour. That is not throughout the entirety of the corridor. It is in certain areas. And in those areas, we will be meeting what's called the FRA sealed corridor guidelines. That refers only to the grade crossings. It does not refer to the corridor in between grade crossings. And so in areas where we go above 79, that means that there will either be 4 quadrant gates, there will be a median, a non-traversable median, or there's, in some instances, there are one-way streets. And all of that is obviously to provide protection for the traveling public against the train. We will be installing positive train control. We already have that on our system here in phase 1. We'll have that in phase 2. Vehicle presence detection, again, at those crossings where we exceed 79 miles per hour. Replacement and or rehabilitation of bridges over navigable waterways. I'll talk a little bit about the Loxahatchee Bridge on my next slide, and a hazard analysis, which is an FRA regulation that requires us to look at the corridor and based on existing operations by the freight train, future operations, where are other infrastructure improvements, where do those need to be made? So upcoming phase 2 work in Palm Beach County, we're almost, I don't want to say almost done, but we're a good portion of the way there. 88% of our crossings have been completed. That's 23 of 26 total crossings. You see those 3 crossings remain. We will start work this weekend on the Loxahatchee River Bridge. That is a pretty important project for us. One of our 3 navigable waterways on the corridor. As part of it, it is a double track structure, but today there is only 1 track in place. So we will add that second track back. That's important for the movement of trains. That means if there are 2 trains in the area, they can obviously both use the bridge at the same time, similar to what we see at the New River. The St. Lucie River Bridge in Martin County is a single track structure that cannot be expanded to a 2-track structure. So again, that 2-track structure makes it very good for the continued operations through the Jupiter and DeQuesta area. We worked closely with the Jupiter Inlet District. They are helping as part of this project to have a 14-inch additional vertical clearance. That is between 2 spans. It will not be a marked navigation channel, but it is more local knowledge from the Coast Guard's perspective. This is, a pretty important project for that area because it means an extra percentage of boats can actually get under the bridge when it's in the down position. And then we're doing a full rehabilitation, electrical system and operating machinery. And then we have this sign up, which we did for other major projects where people can text in and they will receive information. And so the closure period, we will have closure periods on each ends of the project. And then while the bridge is under construction, it will remain in the down position, but there will be 2 points during the day where the bridge will be open to mariners. And again, that's the importance of signing up for that, the text system to get all of the information on when that is happening. And I guess I should say Kim Delaney has joined. Brightline works very closely with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. The Palm Beach TPA has actually brought on the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to help local governments with their quiet zone efforts. That's the #1 question that I think we get, and especially as construction starts wrapping up, citizens, the public is asking, when are those train horns going to go away? And so Kim and Brightline, we've actually been working closely with the Federal Railroad Administration. They came down several months ago and the city of West Palm Beach actually hosted a quiet zone workshop that then included diagnostic field reviews that some of you in this room may have been a part of if you're in the phase 2 project. And so again, Kim will be leading that effort on behalf of the Palm Beach TPA. As a reminder for quiet zones, the railroad cannot apply for a quiet zone. We don't have any part of the quiet zone process except, the TPA has allocated additional funds where needed to bring certain infrastructure at the crossings to that quiet zone level so that it would apply. So we are constructing those improvements while we are out in the corridor. Those again were approved several years ago, so they've been part of our project. And then we provide obviously the information about our operations, and we work closely with our totally separate and distinct company, the Freight Railroad, on what their operations would be. All that information is put into what the FRA calls the quiet zone calculator, and then that is determined how the quiet zone actually comes to be. Then there is a notification period, but all of that cannot occur until Brightline is done with construction, and that includes the installation of the signal system within the corridor, which is pretty much one of the last things. So Kim and I have been trying to work on our messaging with the TPA, and it's good to set, I would say, expectations for the public that quiet zones probably will not be operational until around the time that Brightline begins operations to Orlando, if not a little bit after. And again, all of that will be based on Kim leading this with obviously significant input from the Federal Railroad Administration. They're obviously very interested in what is happening in South Florida. It is no secret that we have had a number of incidents of people illegally going around the gates, or people trespassing on the corridor, or taking their life. And so the FRA has been working closely with us and local governments on how do we reduce the number of incidents. So again, that leads me to safety. We look at safety in every single aspect of everything that we do. It is our number one priority. We have an extensive outreach campaign that we will be working on with our phase 2 cities over the coming months to start really making sure that people understand what a railroad is, private property, that trains operate. It is not a bike path. It is not a shortcut. It is not a place, to sit down and to take a break. And so you can look for more information from myself and Brightline's PIO, Katie Mitzner. We also have been doing some new engineering aspects. We did a red light pilot project in North Miami. Again, the railroad doesn't have any ticket writing authority. So we did this in partnership with FECR, and we had the red light cameras up for, I would say, about 3 to 4 months. And in those 3 to 4 months, we issued more than 900 warnings. We sent more than 900 warning letters to people who illegally either stopped on the tracks or went around the gates. And some people got more than one, which you then realize that there's a significant problem at those crossings. We were able to engage the local law enforcement, and they helped us actually patrol those areas where we knew that we had a problem. And so those are kinds of the projects that, as we move forward, and today we're working on doing. We also installed a pilot landscape and channelization project in southern Palm Beach County, and 7 areas where we had seen incidents. Since then, we've actually had no incidents in those areas. Channelization and fencing isn't the answer for every location on the corridor. That again is what is going to be looked at in that hazard analysis study. And then federal grant opportunities. So we are seeking, in partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation, a RAISE grant. We're looking for, it's about a $45 million project that would include additional enhancements on the corridor. So the Long Island Railroad actually did a pilot project where they placed delineators along the crossing, because what we see down here too is people think that the railroad is a road. And many times we have people who turn on to the road because their GPS tells them to turn left or right. They get confused or they're not familiar with the area. And so these delineators would actually help and tell people, this is not where you're supposed to turn. Do not turn here. So we would be looking at delineators, additional signage, and then additional landscaping and fencing along the corridor. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before we start questions in-house, staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And looking around for raised cards, I see Mo has his raised. Mo, you have questions?
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you for that. It's exciting. I have a lot of questions and comments, etc. But I understand that I need to limit that. So I'm excited a little about door-to-door service. I understand if I missed something, you may correct me, that service will be offered within 5-mile range from the station, right?
That's correct.
And you will be utilizing Teslas.
Yeah, so we have different levels of service. So the Teslas and the shared vans are within a 5-mile radius. The electric golf carts are about a mile.
Awesome. So are you going to be charging for that, or that will be?
So
Complimentary.
today, I don't think we're charging, but we will start to introduce charging for the Teslas and pricing potentially on the shared vans. We do anticipate that the golf carts will remain complimentary for the time being.
So if you charge them, that will be competitive with what Uber or the other services will be charging.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when are you going to be deploying this in West Palm Beach?
It's a little hard to hear you.
When are you going to be implementing this in or providing that service in West Palm Beach?
Today, it was launched
Already?
in November. Yep.
Oh, awesome.
And I
Very
will
good.
say we worked very closely with Alex and the team at West Palm Beach to actually help us do a little bit of rerouting, a pilot project for the rerouting of the perimeter road to make sure that we were, had a good movement of vehicles and keeping everybody safe.
How much do you charge now for the service within 5 miles?
I think it's 10 miles one way for the Tesla.
10 miles? I thought the
Oh,
range is-
$10. Sorry, $10.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting. Thank you. How about the stations that you are building? I thought there was consideration for a station in Palm Beach Gardens. Is that out now, or it's still on the run?
So I will say that I think the proper way to look at that is that Palm Beach Gardens would like to have a passenger rail station. In fact, I was on a panel with Vice Mayor Reed where she talked about the planning that was going into there. Brightline has no plans today to add any additional stations in Palm Beach County, Broward, or Miami-Dade. We are considering a station at Port Miami, but that's still under consideration. So I would say that any future stations will be evaluated from a ridership perspective. Obviously, the more stations that you add, the more time that you add to the trip. We have to be shorter, comparable to getting in your car to make people want to take that journey. But I would say that all of those conversations, will continue to happen in the future.
Are there any plans to add residential and or office developments next to the station in Boca, like you do everywhere else?
Today, the only project that we're working on in Boca is the parking structure in the station.
I see. Thank you. The last question is, when do you anticipate service will be commissioned to Orlando?
So right now, our target is early 2023. It's really difficult for us to give an exact date because once we complete construction, there's a pretty rigorous certification process that's done by the Federal Railroad Administration. It's not 3 months, it's not 6 months, right? It's when we meet the certification process, we can launch. And we feel confident, obviously, that we can work with them to hopefully launch operations as quickly and as safely as possible.
Thank you. Obviously, I have a lot of more questions, but I'll yield the floor for others. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie?
Good morning. What was the time frame? You mentioned the 900 citations that you guys had sent out. What was that time frame?
It was about three to 4 months, and we
3 to 4.
issued 900 plus warning letters.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I thought I heard that correctly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Aaron?
I normally don't speak at these meetings, but you gave me purpose. I noticed in your second slide, you mentioned a new station at the Port of Miami. I'm curious to know, is that going to be a turnaround or a final leg from the Central Miami station for the purposes of, I assume, getting passengers over to the Port of Miami?
That's correct. Yeah, we're still working with the port on exactly what that operation would look like. Because, our downtown station is, less than a mile away from there.
That's
And it's in an elevated structure, right? So it would definitely be a defined service that, as you said, really is targeted to delivering passengers to the Port Miami.
That's quite an investment for just going a couple miles, huh?
We are still talking to Port Miami
Got
on
it.
it.
Thank you.
CJ?
Thank you. This question is for Kim. Kim, could you provide an update on your effort of securing the additional federal funding to seal the entire corridor and also possible expansion? Thank you.
Sure. Yes, please. Thank you.
In fact, I had put my card up to talk on just that. So thank you, CJ, for the opportunity. So good morning, everybody. And sorry for the delay. If there was just a station, I don't know, in downtown Stewart, I would have been here early. So wanted to mention that. So, and to Mo's comment, gosh, I don't recall seeing stations in Boca or Aventura when Brightline first came out with its efforts. So, really strong land use planning and market opportunity in those two locations enabled the construction of those stations to move forward. So in a city like Palm Beach Gardens, that opportunity, I would just suggest from a land use planning standpoint, continues to exist as the city invests in mobility and makes itself a competitive destination. So I just wanted to throw that out there in the land of optimism. So that said, thanks CJ for the opportunity to chat for a couple of minutes about quiet zones and safety improvements. In fact, I was in a meeting yesterday with DOT Central Office and District 4 talking about just those improvements that CJ mentioned. And so as Ali noted, there's an effort underway for FDOT to take the lead to identify additional safety infrastructure along the corridor. And that effort is leading towards the submittal of at least a first federal funding application to install supplemental safety infrastructure. Now, CJ, I don't want to suggest that all the infrastructure necessary to achieve a fully sealed corridor in the way we evaluated it in the field is going to be included in that first, what I think will probably be a first grant application. But that application is looking to add additional trespass mitigation. As Ali mentioned, FRA came down and did a town hall on, actually they've done two town hall webinar type presentations, one in September of last year and a second one about 6 weeks ago, focused on trespass mitigation and the improvements necessary to further discourage trespassing. And so with that, FDOT has been working pretty extensively across the state with a focus though in South Florida and Central Florida, where we have our two passenger rail operations, to identify additional equipment, additional infrastructure to discourage trespassing. That additional infrastructure is comprised of things like fencing and bougainvillea, right? Hostile landscaping, so that fencing is less likely to be cut once it's put in, because there's other measures to discourage you from doing that. Additional pedestrian sidewalks, as well as signage and gates. Some additional exit gates, and that was the missing piece that we talked about in the field. There are about, I think, 16 locations in Brightline Phase 2 that either have 2 or 3 quadrant gates, but they don't have 4 quadrant gates. I think some of those gates will be evaluated as part of this first federal grant application, but I think the additional ones will likely be identified over time. And so that effort is underway. A couple of local governments have reached out to the council to ask for assistance to develop grant applications to pursue trespass mitigation infrastructure. We don't have to do that at the local level. DOT has stepped up, and DOT is going to do that at the state level. Particularly, this is for Riviera Beach, Terrence. And so that effort is underway. What I wanted to mention with respect to quiet zones is that through the council's agreement with the TPA, we're going to be adding some additional outreach to local governments, kind of in the subject of quiet zones and safety infrastructure and trespass mitigation. So we'll be adding a monthly written update that will kind of cover all of those different topics collectively for updates to elected boards and to residents. I get a lot of inbound calls on quiet zones and train horns, and that's just fine. I'm the point of contact, but I think it's a little easier from a regional perspective if we have a regular written update that gives folks that information. And so we'll begin that work My goal is to get something out in the month of April. So you'll have a first written update that you can kind of send folks to. So at least all that information is pulled together and there's a consistent document you can reference with respect to what Brightline is doing, what's the TPA doing, what's DOT doing, where are we in our quiet zone establishment process, what other activities are taking place. So that's our goal, is to just create that consistent information so folks have a place to look for that. So I wanted to mention those things with respect to CJ's question and update. The other thing to just to ask local governments, and I have this for the most part, but we were asked yesterday by DOT to assemble a list of the key contact person individually in each local government who should be the go-to person for kind of rail related matters. And I think I have that, but you'll see correspondence from me following up to confirm. When we send information out as an agency, I kind of like paper the city sometimes. So we try to send correspondence to the city manager, the city attorney, the planning director, the public works director. But that's a hard group to organize. And so DOT has asked, as it carries its work forward, for us to have a single point of contact that's really that go-to person in each local government, just to make it a little easier to administer. So you'll see me following up for that, to make it, to kind of get a core group that DOT will rely on going forward for kind of all things rail. And then that group would be reaching out to others within their organizations, to carry out work as needed. So I just thought I'd mention those things, and happy to answer other questions if there are any.
Okay. It's good to know that Trespass Mitigation has been listed as a high priority in your first phase effort. But how about the extra quad gate to be proceeded in the next phase? Understand we have a pretty tight timeline before the completion of the Riverside crossing in September. So is there any extra effort that we can engage, say at the council level, to push this forward?
So that's on the list, CJ. So what CJ is referring to is when we're out in the field, we looked at all the grade crossings in Palm Beach County Phase 2, and there are a couple of spots where we don't have an exit gate, and Riverside's one of those. And so North Lake is another one. I mean, there are a couple of locations that are like, gosh, we need to expedite that gate before we get started. It's a little tricky for us in the region, I would suggest, because like all aspects of the construction industry, getting rail infrastructure with the delays in procurement is a complication. And so we want to get those gates installed as quickly as we can, because that's a policy priority. We also have a train project that's been under construction that's working towards opening service in January. And those two things might not be on a completely consistent schedule. And so I just suggest that to you, CJ, that we're aware as a planning council, right, that, gosh, that's a gate the town wants, and DOT is aware that the town wants to get that gate installed quickly. But what we know is Brightline's gone through a federal permitting process and that gate wasn't required. So we're trying to balance those things and get the gate installed as quickly as we can, but at the same time, not create complications in a permitted activity that, that gate wasn't required for them to begin service. So it's frustrating, I think. And we're moving as quickly as we can to make that happen. But we have really pretty keen awareness that the supply and logistics of getting additional gates in the region and then getting them installed, that's probably not going to sync up with Brightline beginning service. So that's just a point of awareness. So among the activities that we're going to also coordinate, and I should just mention this, and apologies for the breadth of information, but there's kind of been a lot going on. One of those things is increased law enforcement activity. There's a challenge in ticketing folks on the corridor. So when the gate starts blinking red, it's actually a red light. And what drivers interpret it as is the light's blinking, I better speed up and get across the track, right? And that's actually not how it works. So when the light starts blinking and the gate is activated, it's a red light and you are supposed to stop by all of the traffic laws. we don't have consistent enforcement of that. And so that creates a challenge in the region. So there's a couple of things we can do to make that a more overt conclusion for drivers. One of those is, in our opinion, complete streets traffic calming improvements around the grade crossings, because we have a roadway network where we have east-west traffic and people are hustling through the region, and darn, they're going 35 or 40 miles an hour. And now that pesky gate started blinking and they got to slow down. And we don't have a roadway network that communicates that. And so there's an opportunity to add raised crosswalks, to add raised speed tables, raised intersections, splitter islands, curb extensions, and other traffic calming infrastructure to communicate to drivers, you should actually be going slower for lots of reasons. You're in a neighborhood and PS, there's a railroad grade crossing coming up, so we want you to slow down. That's one layer of conversation that's underway now, right? Which is looking at complete streets, traffic calming improvements, maybe finding federal funding to fund those things out of a different pot of funds, because it's rail safety infrastructure now. It's not just making neighborhoods safer, which is a high priority. It's this extra priority. That's one piece of information. The second is the conductors can't issue tickets when folks are trespassing in the corridor. Only local law enforcement can issue tickets. And we don't have consistency in that in the region. And so one of those efforts that we're trying to coordinate early is, and it's not necessarily popular, so I'll just say that initially, but ticketing folks that are trespassing in the corridor is a way to communicate that this is an illegal activity. And so one of those areas that we're working with the state on is organizing a law enforcement working group to work on ticketing folks, at least giving warnings, if not citations, when they're trespassing in the corridor. And that means when the gate starts blinking and starts going down. Advancing that work before the train starts running is a better way to get more consistent results over time. So CJ in particular at Riverside, for example, where we know we have that exposed exit situation, and it's kind of weird because it looks like you can get through there. You know, that's an area where, for example, in Jupiter, we might need to have message boards up early, like 3 months before the train starts running, and maybe some warning citations getting, you know, issued, because it's a lot of regular drivers in that condition. It's a neighborhood that's getting out for morning rush hour, for example. So that's just food for thought, something to bring back to the town. I'll be following up on that. But I think that's a meaningful solution to a situation where we're not going to have capital infrastructure in place when we'd like to have it, which is yesterday, right? Or at least when the train starts. That's it.
Chair, if I may add two things.
Mhm.
Thank you. So I do want to emphasize a few things, and I will be brief because I know other people have their cards up. Kim touched on a really good point, which is Brightline has went through a 5-year environmental impact process. And then that was also done in conjunction with the Florida Department of Transportation and local governments on determining what infrastructure is needed at every single grade crossing. So every single grade crossing in phase 2 has gates, has lights, has bells, has whistles, has the infrastructure that is needed to protect a motorist or a pedestrian from the train. Remember, these are public roadways crossing private property. The infrastructure is not there to protect the train. It is there to protect the public from the train as they're using that public infrastructure. So if there's not a 4-quadrant gate, there is a gate that is there to warn people that they should not be circumventing the gate when the lights are red and the train is blinking. And I think that what we continue to see, we had an incident earlier this week. And again, even taking a step back, trespassing and these types of incidents, it's a national problem. It's not a Brightline problem. It is a national problem. Unfortunately, Brightline has just seen a high number of illegal activity around the corridor with people making the decision to circumvent the infrastructure and or sadly, to take their own life, on the corridor. And so we continue to see individuals who deliberately circumvent the infrastructure. In fact, we had, again, one incident this week where there was a car that was stopped and another car went around the car that was in front of them to go through the grade crossing infrastructure. I mean, and that is brazen, it is dangerous, and that person was lucky to walk away. And so I think that we all do need to think of it as a layered approach. Like Kim said, it is not a railroad problem, but it is a community problem. And how do we work with our community partners to try to reduce or eliminate, if we can, these types of incidents. That's done through outreach with the school districts, outreach with local governments, with law enforcement, as Kim said. And I would give a shout out to Lake Worth Beach. I know the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office Department in the city actually did a blitz. I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago, where they issued about 200 citations over a week period. Don't quote me on those numbers, but you see, when law enforcement is realizing that it's an issue, and the proof is in the pudding, more or less to be said, that when they're going out there and actually observing and enforcing, people are still making these decisions.
Thank you, Ally. Alex?
Just a comment, I guess, for Kim and the Brightline team for future design and the timing of the arms and the gates when they go down, is also to look at the timing that it takes a pedestrian to actually walk through the entire crossing area, because we still have an issue on Clematis, the one here, in which, and that one we have 3 tracks, so it's actually wider than most of them, but there's not enough pedestrians maybe already within the right-of-way area, may be past the first gate, and then the arm starts going down, and oftentimes people are not able to get out on the following arm before it goes down. It has happened a few times. It's because they go down too fast. There's not enough time for people to cross the entirety of the tracks between the time they start going down and the time they're down. So it's just something to keep in mind. We may time it for vehicles, but maybe sometimes we're not timing it for the speed of pedestrians walking. So just something that I think needs to be assessed, because for Clematis, that is still an issue. And even I've been trapped there a couple of times and have very long legs and I walk really fast. So I've seen people with strollers, elderly people who have an even tougher time, and then you're kind of trapped between the gates. Just something to consider when all of these measures are being designed and evaluated.
If I may, that is actually dictated by the Federal Railroad Administration. It's called constant warning time. And it's actually in the statute, in the CFR, that there has to be a minimum of 20 seconds by the time, that the gates go down, that the train comes through the corridor. It's obviously based on train speed and everything that's in that area. I'm happy to take that back.
This is not the time after from when the gates go down to the train arrives. This is the time between when the first warning starts to the time the arm is down. And I think the issue, at least in the case of Clematis, is that used to be a one track area. Then it became 3 tracks, and the distance between the gates was expanded significantly. However, the timing was not changed accordingly. So it is, again, between the time when the first warning starts and the arm goes down, it's not sufficient for people who are ready in the right of way to get out, basically. And this, again, I'm not talking about people who are actually doing an illegal,
right.
That is another story, but this is people who are ready within the track area. They're not able to get out because there's not sufficient time there. Just something to evaluate.
To take that to the team. I know that the city actually reached out because a motorist did an illegal activity in that intersection and thought that the railroad was at fault, but we found surveillance video and actually showed that the motorist was at fault.
These are not illegal activities. These are people who are walking on Clematis. They're already, again, within the tracks.
I'm saying, so we're looking at that. We're looking at that crossing.
I know in the past I communicated with a lot of people, but I never heard back. But
okay. I'm going to go to Mo first because he's been waiting, and then we'll come back to you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I can skip Mo. Jim has had his hand raised, and I know that Mo has already made comments.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yes, Jim Bell with the City of Boca. We currently have a transportation demand management plan that we're trying to implement with the Brightline station in Boca. And as of January of this year, Brightline told us that they couldn't complete the application until they hire a TDM coordinator and a person from the Fort Lauderdale office who's going to implement a TDM plan down in Fort Lauderdale, and I think possibly also Miami. I'm not sure about that. And then once that person was on board, which they expect to be sometime now or in April, then they were going to, help complete our application. I was just wondering what the status was of that person in Fort Lauderdale that's your TDM coordinator.
It's a pretty technical question, Jim, that I don't have the answer for, but I'm happy to look into it with my team and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Mo?
Thank you. I work for Palm Beach County Traffic Division, and we do operate and maintain traffic signals throughout the county for the exception of Boca Raton and town of Palm Beach. And we have issues always with here downtown West Palm Beach with train preemptions. And very often there are false calls when the gates come down, when there is no need for them to come down. And also we have occasionally, probably it happens on average once a month or once every 2 months, where the gates come down due to malfunction and they stay down for extensive amount of times, sometimes close to 40, 45 minutes. And you can imagine what that causes, mayhem in downtown. So my question to you is Brightline aware of this? And are there any plans on tackling this issue, including, some maybe simplest thing you can think of, that a person there gets an alarm that the gate is down and they can come out, physically, actually send somebody to get it up. Because we've seen on our CCTV cameras when we are watching on Okeechobee, we have seen it where, drivers come out and physically lift up the gates to let others, go through because they realize that the gate is malfunctioning and there are no train activities. There was an incident not long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, in West Palm Beach, where a lady dropped off her husband to take the Brightline train. And when she left, trying to turn right on Clematis, she turned right and she found herself trapped between the gates.
Right, that's because she illegally stopped on the tracks.
I understand. I don't
So
want.
that is the incident that I'm
but the
referring
point that I
to.
want to bring up is that it turned out that alarm and the gates came down unnecessarily. So the issue is that we want to make sure that there are no unnecessary gates coming down, and also we want to make sure that the railroad operators do have or put more effort into communicating with us, giving us advanced warning about that train activities and railroad crossing, closures, so that we can better operate and manage our system, signal system, and also reduce the duration of the disruption, especially when you take care of those false preemptions that are unnecessary, and also the malfunctions that happen that extend for long duration of time. I cannot imagine how could this be not acted upon when you can easily, your work is not necessarily, I'm not talking about Brightline in particular, but I'm talking about the operators in some instances, where their workers are in the vicinity and they realize that there is something malfunctioning with the gate, and they look at the traffic, backing up, for miles. It's very clear you need to have somebody who can manually lift up the gates and let traffic through. So my question to you is Brightline aware of these issues? Are there any plans on working with us and with the local governments on tackling these issues?
So I'll take that in a couple parts. So the first thing is when a gate defaults to the down position, that's what it's supposed to do. It is defaulting in the down position because that means that something has happened within the gate to make it potentially, I don't want to say malfunction, but if the gate isn't tied into the signal system correctly, maybe it's been hit by lightning, maybe roadway signals, they get hit by lightning, they go out. The same thing happens with a railroad signal. The gate defaults to the down position to protect motorists and pedestrians from the train. I cannot enforce that enough. At each crossing along the corridor, there are blue signs that if that issue were to happen, or if there is a car that is stuck on the tracks, and we talk about this really very often, especially with law enforcement, that they need to call and report that. And the FEC corridor is 351 miles long. FECR is responsible for the maintenance of the corridor and for all of the crossings. So as you can imagine, there are people out on the crossing every single day inspecting and maintaining crossings. But if a crossing, for example, gets hit by lightning, that's not on the list of inspections. There might not be an inspector in Palm Beach County. They might be in Broward County inspecting what was on their schedule, and then they get the call to go up to Palm Beach County. So obviously it is a complex process, and we understand that it provides delays to motorists and to the traveling public. But the first thing people should do is to report it. And the second thing people should do is to never, ever get out and raise the grade crossing arm so that people can go under and around it, because a train might be coming. Like the gate arm is down to protect motorists. So I'm happy to have somebody from our technical team follow up with you on that. But I mean, in general, the railroad operates, like signal systems. Sometimes there are incidents, again, where they default to the down position for whatever reason, and they're in the down position for a reason, which is to protect people from the train.
Yeah, so follow up. So this is something that Brightline is, takes care of, or that's not you? Or that's,
FECR maintains their
FEC
corridor. They are responsible for the
They are
maintenance of the
responsible, so
corridor.
it's not you anyway, right?
That's correct.
It's not Brightline. Okay, thank you.
Kim, thank you for waiting.
Just briefly, because apologies, a lot of train talk today. A couple of things just to put in mind. Pardon me. In addition to a law enforcement working group, which was our recommendation yesterday in chatting with DOT, we're also suggesting to them that there's a kind of like a pedestrian access working group. There's a lot of pedestrian scale, human scale components to what happens at grade crossings that we just haven't really zoomed out and thought about holistically. And DOT really has done an excellent job as a state agency, for example, in dealing with complete streets and Vision Zero. Like, we didn't have an organized state approach on that until about 10 years ago. And when we started dealing with the effects of a roadway network, transportation network that was causing these bad outcomes, number one in the nation in pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities on the roadway network, DOT stepped up. DOT initiated a complete streets effort statewide. We have a complete streets guidebook. We now have Vision Zero. We have local adoption. It's really rolled out, I think, remarkably well, and it's award winning because of that. I think rail safety is kind of at that point, like rail matters in the region. We just have arrived at a different place. And this was part of my conversation with DOT yesterday. So some of the nuances of how the rail corridor exists in our very urban region, right, with a very complex roadway network, we just haven't had a chance to zoom out and really understand that. So for example, Alex, the things you mentioned with respect to the timing of the gate going down and pedestrians getting across, we have a typology of conditions. We have these very urban conditions like downtown Clematis, and we have very suburban free flow conditions like Donald Ross, for example. Those are very different kinds of grade crossings, but they're kind of evaluated with the same filter. So we haven't had a chance to break that filter down yet. The signage, for example, Mel, like, I can't even read those little blue signs. I know they're out there because when we did field diagnostics, we were required to identify. I was like, oh, wait a second, what does that sign say? Oh, good, I can kind of see the number, and I have reasonable vision. So we have a signage condition that isn't really overt and perhaps functioning as well as it needs to. We have the opportunity for additional signage. There's been suggestions by some TPA board members that, it's not enough to say trains may be traveling in excess of 80 miles an hour. That's not scary enough. Well, maybe it should say trains are going more than 100 miles an hour, can be going more than 100, or there are other informational pieces that, when we have a chance to talk through them, maybe we can have a consistent set of local signage that gets implemented in the corridor to kind of raise the awareness. So there's a lot of pieces to it. I'm just suggesting to you that, I have like a really long list of all the good ideas and challenges that have been getting raised in local settings like this one. My suggestion is we actually need a working group to kind of lay out all these pieces, like as a pedestrian, what's happening and what can you actually read? Do we have enough time when the gates go down? Because there's a set of federal requirements and then there's our local condition. And there's something happening between those two things that's leading to a very uncomfortable set of statistics for us, which is now, a corridor that has a fatality rate that's not a headline that we want, as a region. So, or as a state. So I just wanted to suggest that to you. There's another set of conversations to come on these matters. I certainly don't have the answers. I have a long list of subjects though, and there's more that are going to come. So I think that's something just to anticipate. So in your local governments, as you see those challenges, if you can kind of keep that laundry list of things, there's an opportunity for us to work together to get a fairly well-established set of brain power to analyze what we have and come up with a consistent set of solutions so drivers understand what they're supposed to do and have more awareness. And hopefully we have a better condition. And Brightline's part of that. Brightline doesn't want to get the headlines that we have. Nobody wants those headlines. So, so that effort is kind of part of what I think we're going to be trying to organize. And DOT is 100% in as the state agency responsible for transportation safety and needs to be, right? We haven't had that consistent approach yet. So that's all in the works. I just wanted to mention that to you. Okay.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you.
Thank you. This is conference of Overton Traffic Division. It's great to learn that we have so many.
You just have to turn on your microphone and pull it towards you.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Kwan from City of Overton Traffic Division. It's very interesting to hear there is a lot of discussion about railroad crossing because we're going to have a new train station in the downtown Boca Raton. So people from that station need to cross the railroad track in order to go to downtown. I think that, we're probably going to see the similar situations like West Palm and other locations. However, I'm assuming that you guys have technical guidelines just from maybe Federal Railway Administration, like how to calculate the warning time, the clearance time. So with that said, our traffic engineers could pretty much trust you guys, expertise, like how to set up timing and for the railroad crossing.
Yes.
Right, that's
I mean,
great.
I'll say there's, nothing that Brightline or FECR does on the railroad is an opinion, right? It is 100% based in fact and the regulations that we are required and obligated to meet and that are then verified by the inspectors that are out in the corridor every single day, making sure that everything's working the way that it's supposed to be making. So, I mean, again, Brightline went through a rigorous environmental impact study process to determine what kind of infrastructure was needed at every single grade crossing. As we've been having this dialogue and we've seen these incidents, we've collectively, I think, as a region decided that we needed to add additional enhancements, right? Working with FDOT and the FRA on what are those enhancements and how can we replicate that at similar areas along the corridor? What have other railroads done in the United States that are having these problems to help get these incidents down? And then, again, the track is inspected, the signals are inspected. FRA, when it had its workshop, had its new regional inspector at the workshop, his name is Rory, handing out cards. Again, the FRA is the federal arm that is obligated and required by law to make sure that we are following the law, right? And so there is nothing that Brightline, our goal is safety, right? So we want to make sure that everything that we are doing meets those requirements and we're operating a safe operation.
Great, because I expect you guys will have more experience dealing with the crossing signals than our traffic engineer. I mean, you're the experts.
But we work closely with traffic engineers and with planning departments. I mean, none of this is done in a vacuum.
And one more question. I know in this country, the last mile is always a gap for transit system. So it's great that you guys offer feeder system around the station. Right now, I think the service line is pretty connecting several major airports in the state, including Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, and Orlando, eventually the MCO, Orlando International Airport. I was wondering, are you planning on running a fixed schedule service between the train station to, Fort Lauderdale Airport or West Palm Airport, so people, when they make their trips, they can expect, I can land in Fort Lauderdale because there is always going to shuttle bring me to the train station. If it's like an on-call service, you may end up getting there, then all the vehicles are out of bounds, there's no vehicle there for available availability.
So that's actually a great idea. And the short answer is, so soon we're actually already offering it, but we will be formally announcing it. We do offer shuttle service every time a Brightline train arrives. And as you know, they operate hourly in Miami and in Fort Lauderdale to provide a shuttle service, a van service to the airport. We do not offer a van service from the airport to Brightline, but we offer a shuttle service from Brightline to the airport. And that's something that we're going to be highlighting over the next couple of weeks.
I think it would probably be a good idea for you guys to talk with the municipalities or, Palm Tram or Broward Transit System and see if you can do some collaboration efforts.
Definitely. I mean, we've definitely talked with Clinton and his team. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Archie, do we have anyone online that wishes to speak?
I have no more hands raised online.
Okay, I don't see any cards raised. Thank you very much, Ally. Appreciate the information.
Thank you.
So I think that's the end of the next is item B, which is the long-range transportation plan update. I'd like to invite Connor to present this item.
Hello and good morning again, everybody. Thank you for having me. I wanted to do a quick presentation just to give you a rundown of where we're at with the LRTP process. As you know, we just adopted one not too long ago and we're starting that process again. So, but before we get into that, I did want to highlight our core products. So we do have 3 core products that are federally required for us to do in order for us to receive our funding allocations. So starting off with the shortest one, which is the UPWP, that is our Unified Planning Work Program. That's our financial document. You all may be familiar with this. You just saw the first draft of it not too long ago. And that is a 2-year program, and that's updated every 2 years as well. Next is the Transportation Improvement Program, our TIP. That is a list of funded projects that we have over the next 5 years. And that's updated every year. So come this summer, you'll be seeing an update on that. And last, we have our LRTP. Now, the LRTP is our long-range transportation plan. And that's required to be a 20-year plan and to be updated every 5 years. Here at the TPA, we do an additional 5 years, and that totals a 25-year long-range transportation plan. And we do that for a few reasons. One of the more major reasons is we coordinate a regional transportation plan with Miami and Broward, and their plans are 25 years. So to sync them together, we also do a 25-year plan. So moving into what an LRTP is, it's kind of a large planning document, but I've tried to summarize it as best I can here. So first off, it maps out the future state and federal transportation investments within Palm Beach County. It also serves as the foundation for the development of the Transportation Improvement Program. So that's that 5-year funding document. It reflects the region's goals through a project prioritization process. And the financial component also guides how the plan can be implemented. So as I mentioned earlier, the 2045 plan was adopted not too long ago, back at the end of 2019. And that plan had again, a 25-year planning horizon, so that brought us to 2045. It defined the priority pedestrian and bicyclist corridors in the county. It also established the 561 transit corridors plan and established performance measures and targets, as well as outlined the TPA's funding programs. Now, moving into the 2050, which is going to be this newest update, there's some federal guidance that we like to that we must follow, and that is the Code of Federal regulations. Thank you. So the first and foremost is the minimum of 20-year planning horizon with a 5-year update. Again, we do a 25-year plan, but that minimum is set in there. The development of an integrated multimodal system. It also has to include the operational and management strategies for the plan, congestion management process, an assessment of capital investments, transportation and transit enhancement activities, environmental mitigation activities, as well as a financial plan. FHWA has also updated their planning emphasis areas. So there's some new areas this year, as well as some ones that have carried over from previous updates. So the first one is tackling the climate crisis. Next is equity and justice 40. Next is the complete streets. There's a public involvement section, DoD coordination, as well as MA coordination, planning environmental linkages, as well as data and transportation planning. So what would we like to answer with the new update? So first off, what will 2050 populations, employment, and travel look like? What is our vision and how will we measure performance? What is our needs and priorities for the region? What would we like travel to look like? How will we pay for it? And finally, how will we implement it? So here's a timeline of the current phase we're in, as well as some long-range milestones. So right now we're in the procurement process. We're currently drafting the first draft of the scope. We're looking to have that finalized by summer 2022. Advertisement will take place in fall 2022 with a selection in the winter. And then the contract start will be also in the wintertime, potentially bleeding into the new year. I also have long-term milestones up here as well. These are going to be items that the TAC, as well as the other committees and board, will be voting on. First of which is going to be the goals, objectives, and measures that will be in the summer of 2023. Cost feasible plan in spring of 2024, and then the final document for approval in the winter of 2024. That being said, we're also going to be doing a variety of updates to you all throughout the process to get your input on things. This is just the first of those presentations. So although there's only going to be 3 that you'll be voting on, actually there might be a 4th, but we'll be doing a variety of presentations to you all throughout the entire process. So before I close, I also wanted to bring up the regional transportation plan. I mentioned that earlier in the presentation, but this is that coordination of the Lrtps between Broward and Miami-Dade, and as well as Palm Beach County. Right now, we're working with them to go through the procurement process. We just wrapped up the scoping, and now Miami-Dade is leading the procurement process. So we're kicking that off. That's going to lead us through till the end of 2022. We're trying to have that done a little bit earlier, but we have it set for the end of 2022, and that will start to correlate with the Lrtp planning process as well. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions. We're also looking for any input you'd like to see in the scope, since we're going to be going through that scoping process till the end of the summer. So thank you.
Okay. Staff, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the online. I do have Khurshid with his hand raised.
Okay, Khurshid.
Khurshid Mayuddin with Palm Beach County Planning Division. Federal requirement to have it updated every 5 years. It does not require that you need to move your planning horizon. And I'm saying that if you are going 30 years from now on, first of all, in modeling terms, the farther you go into the future, the error exponentially increases. Mean you have much less confidence in the model the further you go into the future. With this kind of a technology, where 10, 15 years you didn't have the iPhones, and all the cars are becoming autonomous and electric, and most of the cars now have all those safety features. And buses should be probably autonomous very soon too. Arizona is running some of those. We cannot really predict the way technology is moving so fast. I think going 30 years in the future is just not very good idea. If anything, you should go back to 2035, and feds don't say that you cannot do that. I think you need to keep minimum 10 years. If I'm incorrect, let me know. Then you will have more confidence that in your model output. Otherwise, model output doesn't really mean anything. In 30 years, there will be 40,338 cars. I mean, hello, it just doesn't mean anything. So that's my comment, to move the planning horizon time closer, not further. If anything, if you don't want to do that, you can still update your 2045, not go to the 2050. That's it from me.
Sure, so I can address that. Yeah, I mean, planning for the future is it's challenging. I mean, looking back at the 2045 we adopted in 2019, we had no idea even just a few months from then that COVID was going to hit and change everything in that planning document. So yeah, I would say planning even 1 year in the future is challenging. So and it's impossible to really tell what's going to be happening. I think though still it's important to look into the future. That way we have a plan set and we update that plan every 5 years. And we also do amendments to the plan as well. So we're constantly updating it. But I think it is important to set that plan for the future. In addition to that, most of the MPOs in Florida and including our partners south of us that we run that regional transportation plan with do a 25-year plan, and the model runs are all done based off that 25 years. So for a little bit of cost savings on that, we can use those model results together and it just makes it more succinct. We can compare and contrast the funding that we're receiving over the course of those years. So I think our goal is to continue with the 25-year plan. But I do appreciate the comment, and I do agree, you know, looking into the future it's challenging, but I think it's also important. So
Thank you, Connor. Mo?
Yeah, thank you, Connor, for the presentation. But I have a question about the scope of services that it seems like you are going through this phase now. And as I thought I got it, that you are coordinating that and working with your partners in Miami and in Broward County. So how much are you involving in this, the local governments and in particular Palm Beach County, the biggest, you know, stakeholder here? As you know, half of the entire major roadway system in the county is maintained by the county, and the other half is maintained by FDOT. And obviously, we are a major stakeholder and player. So how are we involved into or invited to get involved in this? And also this forum as well, you know, all the other local governments need to be at least aware of what's going on and maybe have input provided.
Sure. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because there was a mistake on one of the slides. So for the milestones, one of the items that you will be voting on is actually the scope services. I'll be bringing a draft first, similar to the UPWP. There'll be a draft that we present to you all, get feedback on it, and then you can have some time to look over it as well and continue to provide feedback. We can make those adjustments and then bring it to you all for final approval at a separate meeting. But we are coordinating with our partners, both for the regional transportation plan as well as for the Lrtps as well. In fact, we're all meeting next week to get together and discuss, you know, best practices and how we can move our vision regionally as well as locally forward. But you will be seeing that scope in draft form and then providing comments. You can provide comments on that. So we're shooting, like I said in the presentation, for summer for approval. So it'll probably be late summer, maybe July, maybe even into August. So that draft maybe you'll see it June, July-ish. But we'll keep you posted on any updates that we have on that.
So there will be still room for change before you will not get it to us too late in the process, whereby you expect us just to rubber stamp and
Yeah,
right?
No, we really do want to have comments from you all. We appreciate the input. Obviously, we don't want to develop the scope in an echo chamber where we're all just kind of developing our thoughts that, you know, we have internally. So that draft that you see, we want your comments and we're happy to make adjustments to it. And we'll try to get that to you as early as possible so you can have a chance to look it over before the draft review. And then also we'll be hearing from you all to incorporate any additional comments after that.
Thank you, Connor. Terrence?
I had generally the same comment about wanting to look at the scope because we traditionally haven't done that in the past. And we've gotten halfway through the Lrtp process and have questions, little things, and say, oh, well, that's not in the scope for the consultant. To your point, this year, as someone who was still going to work every day during the crisis, I can tell you I was the only car on the road coming out of Wellington, going to Riviera Beach for 4 or 5 months. And something that we may never have contemplated before, that we probably need to, is what if we just ask every government to go on remote work, how many hours a week would they need to allow their staff to work from home? to where we can maintain level of service and not put one more dime in expanding our roadway network. There's a number out there. Is it 4 hours, 10 hours, 18 hours? Similarly, if we ask the entire industry in Palm Beach County to do the same, there's a number out there, 6 hours, 8 hours. If everybody worked from home one day, we could save billions of dollars and just go into a maintenance program for our infrastructure. We would never have contemplated that in 2019 because we saw it in 2020. It was real. Like there was nobody on the road. You could get anywhere you wanted and actually be on time for those of us who were critical and had to get to work. I think that is something that we probably need to seriously look at. And it dovetails into complete streets, not allowing cars to dominate every conversation and every dollar that's invested in our infrastructure. That is really, I guess, I believe this will allow us to begin to make that turn for everything we've been talking about over the last decade that we've never been able to get any momentum on of prioritizing other modes of transportation other than single occupancy cars. So I'm pretty passionate about getting that in the scope and talking our way through as this group, the technical advisory committee of what does it look like when we stop adding lanes when there are much more cost-effective ways to get to the same goal of having a prosperous economy without spending that kind of money. And I think the LRTP is the appropriate place to begin that conversation.
So I have some good news. So not only in the LRTP, but also the regional transportation plan, one of the model runs that we're going to be doing is a remote, it's not called remote work, but it deals with employees working remotely, remote health services, things like that. That's going to be a separate model run. We're not entirely sure what that's going to look like yet. We're going to be working with the consultants to figure that out, but that is something that we're also very passionate about, and we want to see what that looks like. What happens if X amount of jobs go fully remote? What happens if some jobs are partially remote, and how many, what does that look like for infrastructure? So it is something that we're going to be looking into. If you have any detailed input that you want to provide, we're more than happy to hear that from you. So, but it is, yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, unfortunately, it does keep dollars out of downtowns. And so there is an economic development detractor. We all know what's happening to downtowns over this era. So we have to also weigh that. But again, none of these are unknowable, right? It's just a matter of, and we will not be the first entity that's had to look at this. I'm sure every economic development board in the entire country has been, teasing through information on how you create this appropriate balance of returning people to downtown without reinstituting the congestion in the parts of downtowns that people don't like. So just something to keep in the scope, and I'm glad that scope will be here. Hopefully we'll be able to, between now and then, you will have had time to see what best management practices are out there that we may be able to get to some minimal level of understanding of what our options are and how we may be able to advocate for that reality as opposed to just continuing to throw money at this problem.
Thank you, Terrence. Kwan?
This is very good information. I have one suggestion and also one question.
Juan, I'm sorry. Can you just bring it closer for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the good information. I have one suggestion and also one question. My first suggestion is about the LRTP plans for every 5 year. Can we just do a certain comparison every 5 year, like what we are new added and what we are deleted in the next round, so we know is this reflects our development trend and it makes our community better.
Sure. So we do look at those updates. One of the federal requirements is that every 5 years we update the LRTP. We do compare and contrast trends that are happening, projects that are done, projects that haven't been completed yet. We actually break it out by every 5-ish years in the LRTP. But it is something that we consider, and we are federally required to update it every 5 years. So, and actually, throughout the process, every year we're constantly evaluating and taking a look at the LRTP through our Transportation Improvement Program process, through our UPWP. So, yeah.
I think it's more interesting to see why some projects will be removed in the new plan.
Yeah.
And also my question for the LRTP is about the ranking. All the projects in the future 30 years is more like a wish list.
Mm-hmm.
We do need to come up with a cost feasible plan and do some ranking about the projects. So can you briefly explain what's the process or what's the methodology to, to convert the needs plans, from needs plan to the cost feasible plan?
Sure. So there, I mean, I can't really speak on what was done for the 2045 necessarily. I would have to lean on potentially Andrew to do that. For the new plan, that's one of the things that we're evaluating. How we're going to get projects, where those are going to come from, how many of those projects they're going to be, and then fairly and potentially even geographically equitably distributing those rankings across the county, making sure that everybody is getting projects in a fair amount of time. What that's going to look like, that's not really going to be written into the scope. That's going to be something that we're going to be working throughout the process on with the consultant firm. And that's, again, something that we're going to be bringing to you all to get your input on as well. So unfortunately, for the 2050 plan, I don't really have an answer just of yet, but that is going to be something that's going to be brought and kind of worked out through the process. And again, something that you will all have your input on.
Anyone?
I
Oh,
just see
sorry,
Alex.
Something that I've always been kind of curious, and I'm not sure if it has been done by the Palm Beach TPA, is going back in time and looking at efforts from 20 years ago. So, for example, when the 2025 long range transportation plan was developed, again, now we're approaching 2025. Was that model accurate in predicting what volumes would be on the different roads? And then again, by going back, we can kind of reassess, okay, was the model over predicting, under predicting, maybe over predicting in certain aspects, under predicting? How accurate was that model that was done 20, 25 years ago to predict what is now the present? So I'm not sure if, as part of this effort, I think it would be an interesting exercise. I mean, for 2020 would have been kind of not a good barometer because of COVID, but 2025, we look at the 2025 long range transportation plan, and in a couple of years, as we are approaching 2025 or in 2025, see how close those projections were. And realizing that some things may have changed, things that were forecasted did not happen, or things that happened were not forecasted at the time, but at least have that ability, or that at least take a look at it and see where we were right and where maybe we were a little bit off. I think that would be a good exercise that could, again, improve future modeling and planning efforts. Just a thought, and I always kind of wonder if it is being done in some of these plans. I never heard of it, but I think it's a valid exercise of validating, or at least reassessing some older plans.
For sure, yeah, and as part of the scope, we are going to have the consultant firm as well as TPA staff look at previous plans. I don't know if we've written to go back as far as 2025, but definitely back to at least 2035. We're going to be evaluating that, but it's a good suggestion to go back. I mean, since 25, maybe since the plan would technically be starting 20, well, it'll be, yeah, 20, yeah, it'll be close, yeah. So
and you adopt the 2045, so
sure. Yeah, so it may be interesting to look back at the.
And again, it may help improve future modeling efforts. So,
but that depends on whether they were using the Serpent back then, the same modeling system, or it was a different system maybe back then. So that's the other challenge. But
yeah, it was still Serpent.
That's a good point. But the other thing is that I want to say about this is, when you do the model, you also look at and validate it by looking at the volumes that it's predicting. Sometimes it predicts that you'll have less volumes than you had now in 25 years from now, or so on. So these are kind of other, parameters that you can check on how good is your model.
There's a lot of nuances, but I think the overall exercise is a good exercise to conduct.
Good comment, Alex. Yes. Anyone? I don't see any other raised cards. Anyone online?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Connor. So the next item is administrative items. Item 4A and 4B are informational only. There will be no staff presentations unless requested by a committee member. Staff, are there any public comments on these items?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, our next TAC meeting is scheduled for May 4th, 2022. At this time, our committee meeting is adjourned.